What is going on, all you beautiful people out there, Bills fans? It is another episode of the Cover One Buffalo podcast with your boy Aaron Quinn and the handsome man staring across from me on this computer, Greg Thompson. How you doing today, my man?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Just had a rough couple of days, but looking forward to talking about the Bills.
Then, what's a better way to follow up a rough couple days than get on the internet with me and talk about some stuff? So, before we get too into it, because we got some cool things to talk about today, I want to always remember to mention and drive you guys over to cover1.net. That is, the reason we're doing this is to put out the content that those guys put out over there. We just really cover the Bills here, but they cover the gamut of all prospects. They are just cranking out work right now. In the Slack channel, we have a C1 team channel, and just the amount of work that they're putting up with, I have a tough time keeping up. So this Saturday, I'm really going to try to sit down with some coffee and catch up on some of the scouting reports they've done. So if you love that kind of stuff and you're trying to get prepared for the draft and you don't have the time to sit around and watch tape, everybody else over here at cover1.net is doing it for you. Go check it out. You can't beat it. It's the premium content, one of the best spots to go on the internet for draft content. We also have a premium membership, Greg. And before you joined over on the team, you were a premium member just hanging out in the Slack channel, sharing your fire takes with us there. Now you're here sharing your fire takes with us on the interwebs. What about the premium? Like, what drew you as a Bills fan to subscribe to the premium channel, give us your money, and then become an active member of the premium?
Well, it started out with, trying to find people to talk to, like who was looking at the Bills games, who was talking about what was going on, and trying to be able to figure out where good conversation could be found. And it's you get into different places on different social media outlets, and it can get ugly quick, and it becomes obvious that you can talk to people that really don't know exactly what they're talking about, and it's hard to be able to pull those things together. And I ended up finding some of the things that are there on Cover One and really got involved in it. And it's an awesome community. We have people researching things all the time, sharing different ideas. We actually have a handful of people from different outlets and things like that are all premium members, and talking about different ideas, sharing different things. We've really, some days we get really into, today we are going crazy about the salary cap and being able to look at how it worked, what things would roll over, what they have to do. I researched the other day the 89% cash spending floor, which is can be silly and is really getting down into the minutia of things, but we were able to work backwards and figure out, hey, how much money does Brandon Beane have to spend this year? And then we were able to kind of work that into what some potential contracts were. And it helps that when you see these lists and rankings come out there, hey, here's the top free agents of this position, and here's the top guys available in that position. It gives you a better idea of what's practical, what's real. And then you have guys constantly, and they're trying to share different things. So it's a really intelligent group, well-informed, researching things, always contributing. And it's an awesome community to be able to get involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you just saw, if you're watching here on the screen through our YouTube channel, we go live. If you're watching live, I'm showing everybody the content that we have up there at the site. It's every day, new stuff's coming up. So you can't beat that. And like Greg said, the premium channel, being a premium member gets you into the Slack channel, which I think is the best value. It's become a community unto itself. And I would gladly pay for that over and over again. I don't know if Eric has ever thought of getting a lifetime membership, but I would do it just to make sure I keep my spot. So let's get into it, though. This week, obviously, this time of year is super hard to be a football fan. Super Bowl just wrapped up. It's the end of the season. There is a little bit of a break here, even though the teams are busy, putting their boards together and finishing up scouting. It is a pretty boring time of year for Bills fans. Luckily, the Bills took their time filling some coaching vacancies and spread it out for the show. I know that they did that for us to spread out some content. But Ken Dorsey fills in the quarterback coaching job left by David Culley, and then Chad Hall, who we had assumed would be maybe getting that job. I don't know why it took so long for him to fill the wide receiver coach role, but he gets bumped up. Thoughts on Ken Dorsey, just kind of general?
So there's a couple things I really like. I know when we talked about the combination of stuff that we saw in re-signing Matt Barkley and Derek Anderson, one of the key elements that I talked about was my favorite takeaway of it was the fact that it was three guys who all had a sole purpose of improving Josh Allen and making Josh Allen the best player he could be. So I think Ken Dorsey just adds to that. One, you had Ken Dorsey and Derek Anderson together for a 5-year run of the best years of Cam Newton's career, including his MVP season. So I think that it aligns with a lot of the things Derek Anderson was saying and talking about. I'm going to assume are fairly in line and similar to what you're getting from Dorsey. I think that I really like the fact that he's 37. He's still new, current ideas, being able to be pliable and flexible, not stuck in his ways of what have to be done in a certain area or anything. So going from 63-year-old David Culley to 37-year-old Ken Dorsey is a positive move in my mind. And I like the way that it all aligns together with Barkley, Derek Anderson, Dorsey, all there solely focused on making Josh Allen as good as he can be, rather than a guy who's just looking to get into his next offensive coordinator job or head coaching job or backup quarterback waiting for his chance to take snaps. I think that you have a group that's really focused on Josh Allen's development, and that's exactly what we need.
That's all I'm focused on as well. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Things I like about this. Well, first I want to start by saying the Carolina Panthers connections are going to happen. I think we talked about it here before. If I was put in charge of a multi-billion-dollar company and was asked to hire a staff, I would 100% hire people that I've worked with in the past and that I know that I can trust, and I've seen them work and seen them come into the building day in and day out and know that the level of accountability that they have. So I don't get mad at these continued connections. And in fact, I want some of them to continue into free agency, and that's something we'll talk about in the next coming weeks. I don't get mad at it. I don't know why people do. I think it's a good hire outside of the Carolina connections. Dorsey is a football guy. I know people didn't like that Culley didn't have quarterback experience. He had wide receiver experience. He was never a quarterback himself. Dorsey, even though he had a great career in college, did not have a great NFL career, but he still hung around the league for a few years, played for the Niners, Browns. Like he did his thing in the NFL. He studied tape. He was in quarterback rooms with NFL players. He's been in the executive side as a scout, so he has that angle to take into coaching, and now he's a coach. And he's just a football guy. And to be that kind of guy and to be a professional player, you have to know how to break down film. You have to know how to be in a quarterback room with other quarterbacks and manage egos. And that's really what you need out of this coach, because Dable's designing the offense, right? All Dorsey is doing is focusing on how to improve Josh Allen and build up his confidence to execute that offense. So we don't need him to come in here and reinvent the offense. He's just got to, like you said, build up a good foundation for Josh Allen. So I think he's a great person to put in that room, like you said, with Derek Anderson. I think it just only improves the room that we're already happy about.
Yeah, I really like, the fact that I had mentioned before, as long as they didn't bring somebody in who was trying to, hey, let's break him down to the studs and rebuild his footwork or his throwing motion or, something crazy like that. That obviously wasn't going to be who they were bringing in. But, having a guy who's aligned with that, again, already has similarities and connectivity with Derek Anderson, is going to be able to maintain that, same message, same kind of focus. And I actually see it as a little bit of a succession planning for McDermott that, one of my biggest concerns, and I know you and I talked about it leading into this offseason and the coach hiring cycle, was, hey, there's a bunch of guys going crazy about offense. What if we get a sniff from Brian Daboll? What if we lose him quickly? And not that I think he's some miracle worker or some amazing coach, but I think he's good. I think this really sets us up that we now have a sustainable succession plan that if we have a good season next year and Josh Allen performs well, that is going to get Brian Daboll attention. And even if it's not this coming year, but maybe the year after that, it now sets us up where we can take Ken Dorsey and simply step him forward as offensive coordinator to replace Daboll and not skip a beat and be able to maintain the same message, the same focus, the same structure around what Josh Allen is seeing, and being able to go that direction to have that nice, next step, I think is really important, because I don't know that I naturally saw that prior to Daboll. I was assuming it was going to have to come from the outside and didn't see an obvious guy on the offensive coaching staff. So now, not only bringing in, again, I mentioned before about the age for Dorsey, and we talked before about guys like Heath Farwell and Bobby Johnson, but even Bobby Johnson, you're talking 44, and, Castillo was 52. Heath Farwell is 37. Danny Crossman is 52. Chad Hall replacing 64-year-old Terry Robisky. So we're bringing in 3 guys in their 30s, 1 in their early 40s, replacing all guys in their 50s and 60s. That's a nice wave of energy and an injection of energy and hunger into that coaching staff that I think helps, be relatable to younger players and helps know the right ways to motivate them. So I think overall it was a really encouraging hiring cycle.
Yes, and a couple points to things you said. One, I think that it's very legitimate, even though he didn't get an interview this year, that Brian Daboll, if the offense continues on the way that it was in the second half of the season and when they kind of figured out what to do with Josh Allen, if they continue on that path, I think that it's very feasible that he is a head coaching candidate in the next year. I don't know if it's because he's so well respected around the league or he has such a great agent, but his name was brought up for a few coaching vacancies this year. He didn't get the interviews. Not sure what happened behind closed doors. Not sure if he didn't really love any of the jobs and really wanted to build up for another job in the future. Not really sure, but he's going to be a legitimate head coaching candidate if they have similar success as they did at the end of the season this year and better. So, and we're fully expecting that to happen as fans. We want that to happen. So it's good to have that succession plan in place. And then when you talk about some of the benefits of the young guys, I hate to say it, and the team would never come out and say it, but another added benefit of guys that young and hungry is also a little bit of control and being able to manage the message and not have some of these guys. We talked about it a little bit before. Robisky, kind of around the league, has not the best reputation for being a guy that's easy to work with. I think Juan Castillo had a little bit of that. You could tell by some of the post-exit interviews he did with journalists. He seemed to kind of want things to be done his way and wasn't going to do them another way. When you bring in a young guy that's hungry, I think they're more willing to be controlled and listen to the guys above them versus guys that have been in the league longer than Daboll coaching the offensive lines, probably rolling his eyes saying, no, we're doing it this way. So it creates a good structure of power. And I think that's a good thing moving forward.
I think there's some logic to it as well that you had, not Sean McVay young, but, Sean McDermott is a young coach. He was in his early 40s when he first got hired. It was very logical that he would want to bring in experienced guys that he trusted, some that had been previous head coaches like Leslie Fraser, guys he had been with before. You're now 2 years in. He's now I think we talk about the fact that he is holding guys to a standard. He is going through and discussing the fact that, hey, if that's not good enough, we're going to move on. If I don't sleep well at night, we're going to need someone new. So I like the fact that he's doing that. And now he has the confidence and stability that, hey, we can bring in guys that I think have the energy and excitement and hunger to do well. And I can be the experienced guy. I can be the head guy that's, helping mold and develop them rather than trying to build stability around himself early on so that he could focus on his new role. I think it speaks well to his comfort level in the role and that how he feels like he's developing and moving forward. So I think it's really logical and something that I think is a positive as far as his comfort level and his really kind of getting his footing.
Yeah, and the most important assistant coaching positions, he still has guys that are veterans in the league. Obviously, Leslie Fraser has a long career in coaching. Daboll is not new to the coaching game as well. He's got a vast amount of experience. So where you need experience the most, I think he has it still, even with the youth movement that has come in. So it's a nice balance. And it does provide them the ability to have succession plans in place as moving happens, because it happens to every team every year. Coaches come and go, move up into other positions in other places. We'll get to a conversation about that, though, because it's something I think that is interesting and is going to be a hot topic, I think, going into next season. But let's talk about Chad Hall a little bit before we get into that other topic. Chad Hall, a guy I didn't really know much about until this offseason. I saw his name when I was scrolling through the flyers they give you at the stadium. I said, oh, okay, assistant offensive coach, cool. Or assistant to the head coach or whatever he was. When you start to look at him, it actually isn't that bad. Again, another guy that played the position, he played in the NFL, but he was just a guy hanging out at the bottom of a roster. But another guy that played the position, has a ton of energy, young guy. What do we know about Chad Hall? And I think what can Bills fans expect?
It's someone that's young, energetic, was, not a great receiver, played at Hawaii, but hung around the league for a little bit, and then got immediately into coaching and went into that kind of path for it. So I think he's someone that can speak to players that, hey, I've done this, I've scrapped to make a roster and to be able to be in that, that fight for spots, but I also have the knowledge to be able to do it because I didn't have the physical skill set to make it, and I made it just because of my understanding and route running and hands and understanding those things. So I like the fact that he was already there with the team, kind of earned it, and is ready to move his way up, and is able to then, I believe I read that he had a strong hand in developing Robert Foster because he was working with a lot of the practice squad and back end roster guys from a development standpoint, and had a huge hand in that development because it was a lot of technique, footwork, getting out of jams, getting off the line, being able to get into your route tree, how to get your hips down and be able to make sharp cuts. And those were things that, Chad Hall never had the physical gifts that Robert Foster did, but he had the technique, the footwork, the understanding of how to do that. And I think that he had a big hand in that development. So it's something that I think is really going to be able to come along and speak to what the guy's development and opportunity is, because no matter what, I do think that we probably bring in a veteran receiver, maybe two, but it's going to be a young receiver room. Zay Jones is going to be in his third year, Robert Foster in his second year, Isaiah McKenzie in his third year, those kind of guys, if McKenzie even makes a roster, and maybe a free agent here or there, and then some draft guys. So it's going to be a young room, and having a guy that's young and energetic and hungry like Chad Hall that can motivate them and speak to them, I think is really exciting.
Oh, sorry, I had to mute my mic. My kid's upstairs. I got a toddler, and if anybody has toddlers, they know that it is a caged animal living in your house, running around. So I don't want it to be running around while you're talking. Anyway, yeah, I totally agree with everything that you're saying there. One thing that's interesting to me, and I think that needs to be talked about a little bit, and I know some people do, is questioning some of the moves that have previously been made by Sean McDermott and questioning his ability to put together and keep together a coaching staff. And I think a lot of it will depend on how it goes this year. And if at the end of this season, there's another group of firings at the end of the year. Obviously, we've seen Dennison get fired, the wide receiver coach from his first that was with Zay Jones. They came in McCagione or whatever.
Yeah, McCaughan.
Juan Castillo gets fired. Rubisky gets fired. So every year we're losing a few key coaches due to poor performance at their positional coaches. I don't know that we can necessarily say them. I'm not going to take to Twitter and say he can't find coaches, because obviously that's not true. But is it something that there should be concern about moving forward, or will this year be really kind of what we point to and say, oh, see, he finally got it right?
I try not to be a homer. I want to be even-handed. I am an enormous fan and supporter of Sean McDermott. I'm going to handle that the same way when people questioned, well, how do we know that Brandon Beane can identify offensive talent? And I will say it's fair to question that. It's fair because we haven't seen a great deal of sustained success with that. So it's fair to ask. I don't think it's fair to assume that they can't. And I would handle this the same way. That I think it's fair to question, hey, why have we now turned over? Why are we going into our third wide receiver coach? Why did you hire a quarterback coach who had never been a quarterback coach before? Why did you hang on to Danny Crossman that long?
Dennison, teams, what was it? Denver didn't want to even get close to sniffing to bring him back. Why do you bring in a guy that can't even get back in the league as an offensive coordinator?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's fair to question that, but I don't think I think it was more, they were the right guys at the time. They were the best guys that interviewed for the job. He was putting together his first staff, and I would rather have a guy who was willing to admit people are not up to par and not meeting the standard and replace them than a guy who was stubborn or had, the gambler's fallacy and was just going back in and being, no, I'm going to make it look good because we're going to overcome that, and I'm going to show you that it really was the right hire, and we're going through there. January. The same thing we talked about that, I'm glad to see Brandon Beane cut bait on Kelvin Benjamin, where some GMs would have said, no, I'm going to show you it works, and they're going to double down on it and extend him and re-sign him. So it's the same idea. Would I rather that we identified the right coach in the first place and just took right off? Sure. But the fact that they weren't working out and he cut bait, didn't, be painfully loyal and try to stick through it, even though they weren't performing, and now is bringing in new guys, I would rather see that and an opportunity to go in and try to, find the right people rather than sticking with it.
Yeah, no, I think there is something to being able to call it quits with whatever you're doing in life when the time is right. And that includes obviously firing coaches. I agree 100%. I guess I do get a little nervous that you want continuity. I know that fans hate hearing that term, and it's really hard enough to have continuity with your coaching staffs with the way the NFL is. And it's not a very big pool of people that are available to move up into the coaching ranks. So when positions open in other places, the pool to hire isn't massive. So guys get moved around every year when they're not getting fired, right? Just moving up the chain into different coaching positions. So that amount of turnover already exists every offseason for coaches, and the fear of that turnover already exists. I guess where my fear is coming in is, like we said, 3 wide receiver coaches in 3 years. Yeah. You have a bunch of young guys. You really want to start to develop some consistency there. I'm glad that they didn't fire Dable like some people were suggesting. That would have been horrible to have to.
I think that would have been detrimental. Yeah.
Yeah. Another offense. We've seen it with the Bills so many times. A while back, I think when we first lined up McDermott and Beane, I ran through the timeline of all the hires from GMs to assistant to offensive defensive coordinators, and the overlap and the amount of change. It's impossible to put a team together when you have that much change. So I would like to see that start to slow down a little bit. I'm not going to blame McDermott yet. I'm not going to get on Twitter and start attacking him, but I do think it's something to watch going into the next offseason if they can keep a staff together. Not because guys are getting hired in other places, but keep a staff together because they pick the right guys and they're doing their job.
I think Sel Wilson in the chat really brought up a good point that there's a huge difference between, like you said, completely scrapping it, which firing someone like Dable would have been, versus tinkering around the edges and being able to just bring in a new voice to carry through the message that is sustainable and building continuity. So one thing the Bills have, one of the only organizations or the small handful in the NFL that are going to have coming into next year, the same GM, the same assistant GM, the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator, the same defensive coordinator, the same quarterback. Having that sustainability specifically for Josh Allen and that kind of same model and the same guys picking the groceries, the same guys cooking the dinner, that idea of knowing what scheme we're running, what kind of guys fit that scheme, that's going to pay dividends this year with the same scouts going after things and knowing what scheme we're running and what kind of guys fit our model. That's going to pay off this offseason with the embarrassment of riches that you like to say, in how many draft picks we have, how much free agency flexibility we have with the cap space. Being able to look into that, that's where the continuity is going to pay off. When you make some changes around the edges in some of the individual position rooms, those guys are executing the plan that Dable and McDermott and Fraser have. They're not necessarily coming up with their own philosophy and structure. They may have some intricacies of how they can execute on those things, but they're not starting from scratch and inventing their own, world. Chad Hall is going to be executing how Brian Dable wants his wide receivers to do things. Ken Dorsey is going to be executing how Brian Dable sees those things being done in the quarterback room. Heath Farwell is going to execute how, Sean McDermott wants the special team set up, and each of them are going to get to put their imprint on it and to do that. But position coaches are executing on what the plan already is, not necessarily molding and creating the plan. The fact that we have that sustainability and continuity at the coordinator level, at the head coach, at the GM, at the assistant GM, with the scouts, I think that's huge in that we're going to see the benefits of that through this offseason and the roster they put together.
If you're wrong, I'm flying down and slapping your face off. No, I agree. I do get nervous. Those guys, I agree, they don't build game plans, right? They're not taking hey, I came up with this new offensive system, Dable, I want you to do this instead. But they spend a majority of the time and especially with the wide receivers, and hopefully as we fix the offensive line they spend the majority of the time watching film, breaking down film with these guys, getting them to see the game in the right way. And it's a young youth movement on this team. And I do think it is very important in that sense and having the right guys. And I just hope that they've got it right this time, because I think the coaching issues and overlapping of coaching and the constant turnover that the Bills have had throughout the drought actually just extended the drought. Obviously not having talent didn't help them, but I think that it always was extended by the lack of continuity and the lack of consistency. I think it can set your franchise back a year or two. So I would like to hopefully know that Sean McDermott and Dable and Fraser have put together a staff that's going to work going forward for the next few years, because I really think they got to get it together right now and really show progress this year before fans start to totally lose their mind. And then the pressure's really on.
Well, and look, you talked about it. I think talent is a relative term. People need to realize every single guy that makes an NFL roster is incredibly talented. And don't get me wrong, there are extreme high-end premium elite guys. Like, there is something a little bit different about Odell Beckham Jr. and about Aaron Donald and whoever, and, Tyron Smith. Those guys are different. But the middle 70-80% of the NFL, when you take off the top 10%, bottom 10%, all has to do with what scheme they're in. Are they being used properly? And are you put in the position to be successful? Yeah. So, constantly restarting every freaking 2 years with a new guy, and from a 3-4 to a 4-3, or from a man coverage to a zone, from a run heavy zone blocking approach to a man heavy power scheme, that kind of stuff just completely sets the franchise back. Because now, your scouts spent the entire season looking for, quick footed zone heavy offensive linemen that can get out and pull and be able to get out in space for those wide tosses. And now you fire that coordinator and offensive line coach, and, oh no, I need, tacticians who are powerful with heavy feet, who can, really get their hands on guys. Like, oh, well, that's not what I've freaking been scouting all year. And it makes such a huge difference.
There are very few guys like a Kyle Williams that can last all different types of defenses and adapt to different positions. A lot of these guys are stuck into scheme. And it does. We talked about it, about fixing the Bills' offensive line, because they need an entire new offensive line outside of Dawkins. And we're trying to warn people, even with the embarrassment of riches that they have this offseason, it's unlikely that you can switch that over in one season. So when you make those types of changes, it is a 2 to 3 year fix to then tell those scouts and GM, hey, I need all these new pieces. It's not going to happen. It's not like Madden where you can just release everyone and pick up the guys that you want. It's something that takes time. And we're going to see it this year. We have the offensive line scheme and ideas in place. We need a whole new unit. It's not going to happen in one offseason with a ton of money and a ton of draft picks. That's just not the way the league works. I'll be shocked if they fill more than 2 starters in this offseason. I feel like that would be a real huge success for us if we replaced and brought in 2 new starters. So it is something that takes time, and it definitely, if you don't get it right, it can really hurt you. But to your point, Vlad Dukas and Mills would probably they'd probably dominate the AAF, the Alliance Football League. They if they went down there, and they're some of the worst guys in the NFL. We have one of the worst offensive lines. If they went down the AAF, they'd be the best players in the league.
Yeah, if you make an NFL, so people joke about the 2 coaches we talked about tonight. Ken Dorsey, oh, he was terrible. The guy lost 1 college football game ever, won back-to-back national titles, and then spent 7 years in the NFL. Do you have any, does anyone listening even know anyone personally who's ever played in the NFL? If you had a guy who was a legend at your high school, the best guy to ever play at your high school, you might have a guy who made it to the NFL.
Might have a guy that played D1.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. So, I mean, guys who made it to that level. Chad Hall was a scholarship athlete at Hawaii and then made 3 different NFL rosters and was on NFL rosters for 3 seasons. That is phenomenal. Like, you are such a special elite athlete to get to that level, that it's, so much of that, again, is opportunity and timing and situation. And it's, special to be able to have those guys. So finding now, their third straight season of the same kind of structure, the same kind of environment. I think it's huge for Josh Allen. I think it's huge for the organization. And I'm excited. Like I said, I really think it's going to pay dividends on the kind of players they can bring in, because they were all scouting for them all season on the pro personnel side, on the college scouting side. They were looking for that type of player and really finding the guys. That's where that doesn't make a difference in the first, second, even third round. The first, second, third round, you're looking at those premium blue chip guys and whoever's there. Where it really pays off is when you snag your Taron Johnsons, your Matt Milanos, your guys like that later in the rounds. Like, oh, hey, not everybody loved this guy, but he's a great fit for us.
Yeah,
that's where you snag those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's gonna be great. And another AAF point: if that league existed when Ken Dorsey was getting drafted and he went in the 7th round and struggled on to make NFL rosters, he probably would have been the star prize of a league like the AFL. Teams would have been clamoring to get their hands on him. So just because a guy just hangs around at the bottom of the NFL doesn't mean he's a bad football player. If there were other leagues, they would be ripped off of rosters in a heartbeat.
I mean, I know that he already got picked up on the Raiders practice squad, but the AAF is made for Nathan Peterman.
Yeah.
Like, that's where when you don't have, cornerbacks who ran a 4.35 with a 1-4 10-yard split who can break on a dime to be able to cut on your out route, you can complete some of those or get away with some of those. And, just being able to go through that kind of thing, that would have been an awesome spot for him, and he might still end up there.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, let's get off that topic, because we did have the Super Bowl last week. I don't want the Nathan Peterman fans coming into my Twitter because you brought it up. So no, we had the Super Bowl last week. A lot of people found it unenjoyable of a game, not because of the outcome. I found it unenjoyable because of the outcome, not because of the game. I actually thought the game was fascinating. I was tuned into the game the whole time, had a ton of attention. I'm the oddball football fan, I think, in a lot of ways, at least to my just regular crazy football fan friends. A lot of them didn't like it. I saw a lot of complaining on Facebook and Twitter about the game itself. I really loved it. I love that kind of football, and I thought it was good for the game, but I don't think the commissioner felt the same way. How'd you feel watching the game?
All right, Bray, are you listening carefully? Or have you braced yourself?
I've never listened to anything you say. I would just mute and then watch your lips stop moving. No,
that's why I'm asking you to prepare. Don't put me on mute this time. You were right. And the Super Bowl was won on defense and by dominating the line of scrimmage.
Yes.
Just let it soak in. Let it wash over you for a moment. You were right. I literally was thinking about it while we were watching, in that, don't get me wrong, I like the fun 53-50 games too. It is exciting from a fantasy football and a gambling standpoint, and it's more exciting to watch those big plays in the moment. But I enjoyed the game. Like, I like the fact that it was within a score and it was 3-3 into the fourth quarter, and that, I guess it would have been cool to see a little bit better execution. I would say I would have loved to see 17-13 kind of thing with a few better elements of execution. I do think that it wasn't just great defensive ball play. There was some poor offensive execution, but two of the greatest defensive minds in football history went head to head, and Wade Phillips and Bill Belichick won. They beat the opposing offense. And going into the fourth quarter with 3 points or holding Tom Brady to 13 total is a great game by Wade Phillips. And obviously Belichick completely dismantling the top scoring offense in the NFL and holding them to 3 is a historic performance. But that's what it was. It was a great defensive effort. It was really well fought. I think the multiplicity and the variety of the Patriots defense, and having, you never knew if Van Noy or Hightower was a defensive end or was rushing or was blitzing coverage, dropping back. They ran kind of a 6-by-1 the whole game with 6 guys across the front, 1 linebacker, and then the 4 in the secondary, just to stop the run, and you didn't know who was coming, and they sent 5 over and over again. It was a really well played game, and I would have obviously loved for the Rams to win and to watch the Patriots lose, but it was a great defensive game. And although, again, I would like to have seen a little bit more scoring, I actually was very entertained and thought it was a really well played game, and appreciated the defense, even if there wasn't all that many points.
Yeah, I mean, I understand, and we argue about this a lot, and a lot of it's just in fun, because a lot of times I'm just being hyperbolic in the Slack channel and trying to get people going. But I do believe in my core that at the end of the day, regardless of the DVOAs, like the Patriots never have a regular season defense that is going to be the number one defense in the league, DVOA, but they always seem to get into the playoffs and play very well, and they tighten up like a snake on you the later in the playoffs you get. And when in the biggest games, Bill Belichick has stopped some of the most prolific offenses in the history of football. We talk about the greatest show on turf, Peyton Manning, the Steelers. I mean, he's just stopped them all at different points in his career. The only thing he hasn't been able to stop is Eli Manning, which is absolutely absurd to me.
Super weird.
A very weird kryptonite for him. But no, but so I do think that the adage is true. Not that, and I agree with you. Your point is to get to that position, you need to have great offense throughout the season to even get into the position. Once you're in the position, though, I do think that you have to have that balance and to be able to still dominate the line of scrimmage and play defense. And the Rams showed that they were able to get to that point, but they didn't have the ability to dominate the line of scrimmage specifically. They did play great defense, but on offense, they couldn't establish the line of scrimmage and get anything going. And that ultimately is what killed them. Outside of, obviously, I agree with you, there was some bad play and they got into Goff's head. But if they were able to get Gurley going or CJ Anderson going, they could have made that a game.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, so when you talk about and for anyone who isn't there, Aaron and I go back and forth all the time in the Slack channel, and some of the premium members get freaked out like we hate each other. But we both are just very passionate and sometimes just have fun and being able to debate passionately about things. And my point has been that I don't think you can get to that point without a great offense. But I think what proved out was kind of the blending of our two kind of mindsets, in that the best defense of the great offenses are who won. So you had teams like the Rams and the Patriots that to even qualify into the group who could win, you had to have a great offense to just get into that group. But once you got into that group, when you saw teams like the Chiefs and some of the other teams fall by the wayside, the teams that had the great defenses of those with a great offense, those were the ones who won because they could balance it out. They could still put some points together, but they could stop the other team when it mattered. And that combination is what's really needed. And the crazy part, it always makes me crazy with the Patriots in the greatest luxury they have. And you can argue about how much is from them, how much is because the division, how much is cyclical and the division constantly chasing them. But the luxury of knowing that they're going to make the playoffs, and knowing in air quotes, but they know that they're going to make the playoffs. They can almost experiment. They can almost play around, in that they don't have to, kick and scream and claw for every single item. They can get to the point where they're slowly improving and developing, and that Belichick has the benefit and the luxury of knowing that, hey, I don't have to show my best stuff until the end. Whereas other teams, you have to show your best stuff every week just to live and survive and get that win. And he's able to kind of tuck things away and still be good enough to just barely get by, and eventually then use his best stuff that you've never seen before. And I think the example in the Super Bowl, they were running a 5-wide offense with 2 tight ends and 2 running backs. So they had Dwayne Allen, Devlin, Rex Burkhead split out wide in a 5-wide because they finally figured out how to get Wade Phillips into his base defense, but allow them to pass. They never practiced it the whole season. They just figured it out at the very end, and they won the Super Bowl with it.
Yeah, no, it's adaptability. Another thing I thought that was really interesting, and Bill Belichick's always been known to do this, right? If you have a singular weapon, he's going to neutralize that weapon, right? So Aaron Donald still did get a few pressures. He was still disruptive in his game, and he dominated his position. But early on in that game, the Patriots came out. I don't even know how many run plays they ran in a row, but they ran right into Aaron Donald. That's one of the best ways to neutralize a defender like Aaron Donald, is to attack him.
Yes.
And get him. He's going to be aggressive, and you can get him off his spots. And again, I think that comes back to the point that I was trying to argue is, yes, you have all these great offenses, and it's great to be able to spread the ball out and have crazy amount of passing statistics. I want that for Josh Allen. But at the end of the day, you still also have to be able to run the ball. And the Patriots always have had good running backs. They don't always have the biggest names running backs since Corey Dillon was there, but their running backs are always become household names and move on and fail at other places.
Yeah, get paid by someone else.
Yeah. But they always are able to get a great running game going and establish the run. And then that helps them to create the balance where you don't know what they're going to do when they come out in that 5 set with 2 running backs, 2 tight ends, because they can really do whatever they want at that point and dictate the pace of the game. I think it's important to maintain that kind of balance. And I know fans in early September just want to huck the ball around, and they think anytime you line up in any type of run formation that you're bringing the game back to 1950. But keep in mind, the Rams primarily run out of bunch formations and running formations and run off the pass game. So it's not just because you see the Bills doing that doesn't mean that they want to bring back to the Ice Bowl era of football. They just don't have the personnel that these 2 teams, these 2 great offenses we saw go head to head. But I think balance is the key in all things in life. And I don't think that just because we see a lot of points being generated in football, that changes the idea that, and I think that's what McDermott and Bean are striving for, is to create a balanced roster anyway.
Yeah, one of the big takeaways that I take from, I think it's dangerous to do I think some people go a little overboard with, hey, show me what the past 4 Super Bowl winning teams did on their roster and let's do that.
Right.
It's not always that simple. But one area that I do think the Patriots show that I hope the Bills will see this year is the importance of depth and having guys who can play their role when you need them. And that I think the Bills were very fortunate. And I think a lot of fans, especially some of the maybe guys who favor Madden and things like that, that it gets easy to think, oh, let's trade our depth. Let's just get the best starting lineup possible. And we'll just start those 22 guys every single play, every single game. And it just doesn't work that way. You need, 25, 30 guys, let's go on defense. You need 15 or 18 guys who can all play their role. And there might be some games where that dime corner plays like 70% of the snaps, and then the next week, like 8%, because you just don't need that. And then like Devlin at fullback or the second tight end, or the
Chung went out early.
Yeah, so being able to have guys that can come in and step in, that's the huge element that Brandon Beane's going to have this year, not having that $55 million dead cap anchor around our neck. You're going to be able to have quality depth at a lot of positions. Competition, we got into it today in the premium Slack channel about what is Levi Wallace. And we'll go down that path when we do the position breakdowns, but being able to have the luxury of, hey, that's great, and I'd like to see a draft pick or a veteran free agent signing to compete and let them figure out who's better. And last year we had to barely cling to hope that we had someone who could step into play. Whereas this year, I think we might have some really quality guys not make the roster. And that's an exciting feeling. No,
definitely. And yeah, I mean, overall, the Super Bowl was fine. I don't think that people are going to look back at it. I know it was historically low offense. I don't think people are going to, I think history will be kind to the game itself when people rewatch it. I thought it was a fine game. And while it lacked the exciting scoring plays, I was on the edge of my seat because any play could have changed the game. Sure. And so you saw plays there to be made. And when they weren't made, you're like, oh my God, I was so close. Or, like that one play could have turned the outcome of the game. So just because a lot of scoring doesn't happen doesn't mean that football is less exciting. And it was the last one. And so that's always exciting to have. But it wasn't fully the last one. And this is a topic that I'm going to surprise you with a little bit, because we didn't talk about going into the game, but we talked about the AAF a little. Yeah. And they're starting right up. Is it something, are you, as a degenerate gambler, are you going to keep your eyes on the AAF? Or
it's kind of like gambling on the Pro Bowl or preseason football. Like, that's just not healthy. So right. I'm going to watch and be interested, because if football has the option of being on my television, it's going to be on my television. So I think it starts on CBS this Saturday. Yeah, I think are the first game. So I'm going to check it out. And really it comes down to the quality. If it's good football that's fun to watch, then yeah, I'll watch football all day. I can watch football anytime. So I'm excited about the opportunity. I know they even set up some things where you can do some fantasy leagues. So I might dabble in one of those to mess around, just to have something to watch and root for. And then once I figure out who's good, then I'll gamble on it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting thoughts that I have on this, and I won't go into all of them, but I am very excited about the AAF, and also not as excited, but kind of curious to see what the XFL new rebranding of the XFL will be. I have been calling for this type of not competition to the NFL, but another league in the US that can be a breeding ground for experiment, can be a breeding ground for the guys that just have a bad combine, have a bad pro day, maybe have an injury that just knock them out. They don't get the look that they need, can't put tape together really anywhere else. The CFL season, the way the season is in the CFL, is not good for guys trying to get contracts in the NFL, because if you sign a season and the team won't hand over your rights like they did with Duke Williams, you can get stuck there through your prime years. Yep. We saw it with Wilder. James Wilder was trying to get out of his contract with Toronto, and they wouldn't release him out of his contract. And there was a good chance that he might have been able to stick to an NFL roster after the season he had with them. He didn't have a great season last year. So there's a little bit of contract control that the CFL does not make a great place for young talent that is on the skirt of making an NFL roster to put tape together. So I think these leagues are going to be good for that, being able to put some tape out there for guys with old NFL coaches and people that have been in the league, GMs and things like that. But also, and Ben Albright tweeted this, I think this is a really great place because the NFL has not been forced to compete with anybody for viewership in any way. I think it's going to be a really good breeding ground for different ideas to bring to the NFL to make the game itself better. We're seeing they're getting rid of extra points in the AFL. That's a rule. So it's all 2-point conversions. Kickoffs are gone. You get the ball at the 25. Onside kicks, no onside kicks. So the option you get instead of an onside kick is a 4th and 10 from the team zone 35. So like that's an interesting wrinkle, because the league's worried about that stuff, and then they're going to speed up the play clock. So 30-second play clock as opposed to a 40-second play clock. So I think it's a nice benefit to the NFL to sit there and watch and to see how some of these different rules impact the game, and if it's something that they want to bring into the game.
Yeah, I think that's huge for the owners to see it, because I think that's always such a big portion of their hesitancy is, well, I think it might work, but I'm not sure. There might be unintended consequences. So I think you're exactly right that being able to see it in action is going to be critical to be able to have some more impetus there. And then, like you said, maybe that's when you say competition, you're not saying that, hey, people are going to literally prefer the AAF over the NFL, but it's going to be, hey, maybe there's some small pieces of quality of play, of the customer experience and viewership. Maybe there's a different way they handle, a speedier review process, or that maybe people realize that, hey, I don't really miss kickoffs. Maybe that's not that big of a deal. All those different pieces are different parts that could come into play that all of a sudden are more tangible, that force the NFL's hand that, and maybe that gets into the competition committee's minds quicker that, this really does work. I was a little nervous about that. And now all of a sudden, because I think people underestimate how many things barely don't pass in the competition committee, where things are proposed and there's the guys like, well, maybe you're right, but I'm just not sure. I'm not ready to vote for it yet. And all of a sudden they can show them some film of the AAF and be like, look, this worked out really well. I think it's going to be really functional and with very little downside. And now all of a sudden those are 1 or 2 extra votes that go in favor of it. And now we see something that, I think eliminating extra points or eliminating the kickoff, it sounds so drastic, but maybe now watching it, maybe we'll realize, there really isn't much to that, and I prefer this style of football. So I'm excited about it, and I think that for anyone who listened when I did the interview with Farhan Lalji from the CSN network up north, he talked about how the bottom 10%, the bottom 5 to 10 guys of a CFL or of an NFL roster are equal to the top 5 to 10 guys on a CFL roster. I think we're going to see things like that. There's going to be some guys in the AAF that are just hanging on in the AAF and, are just there because it's going to be fun and exciting. But there's going to be guys in this league who will make NFL rosters. Yes. And this will be the, maybe the kind of re-debut that they needed to be like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that guy. He looked pretty good. And all of a sudden that's the impetus he needed to get the camp invite or to avoid a team signing an undrafted free agent and giving that guy a shot. I think we're absolutely going to see this, maybe not as a complete developmental league like the G League is in the NBA, but at minimum a platform for guys who don't really have that platform right now or aren't ready to go to, the CFL is some pretty major rule differences that doesn't always translate. So maybe this gives them that impetus.
Yeah, no, I think it is going to be the only real conduit for the guys that, and it's so easy. We talk about the coaching pool being a shallow pool of hire. It's very easy to get on the outside of scouts and coaches' vantage point, even though they're scouring everywhere for talent. If you're a 2 to 3 year vet that dealt with some injuries and just got off a team, it's easy to be totally forgotten about and not get that second chance because there's nowhere to go show that you can still do it without getting signed by the team. So I think for those types of guys, this is a huge advantage to have some type of place for them to go play. And I think you nailed it with the competition committee, and fans get so mad when things don't pass, but it is very difficult when you own a multi-billion-dollar business to make significant changes to the product. Anyone that is involved in any major corporation knows the amount of meetings and votes and things that go through to making even the most minor changes. So as fans, we get mad when something doesn't pass, but I don't blame the guys that are sitting there saying, well, let's wait, because that's a pretty substantial change to 100 years of how we've done this. And if we screw it up, talking about billions of dollars online. Not that the NFL, people are not going to stop watching the NFL, but people get pissed when the rule changes go wrong. And
Yes.
if they vote in something that's wrong and the fans feel like it upsets the game, it is not good for the Shield. It's not good for the league. So I get why they don't do it. This might be like you said, the opportunity to see it at play live and poll fans. How did you like that? They're talking about getting rid of, eliminating, there's no television timeouts with 60% fewer commercials. Maybe that's something that fans want for the NFL. You know, the NFL probably doesn't want to hear that, but it's going to be a nice breeding ground for experiments.
No, I think it's great, and I think it's exciting, and it's also football on my television, which is one of my favorite things.
And it provides another exciting thing is it provides jobs for guys that can't quite make the NFL circles. If you look into how to get into the NFL, it is extremely hard, from being a scout just to getting involved in the back office, the front office of NFL teams. This is giving those guys that are almost right there an opportunity, because they're hiring scouts. They're hiring guys in the personnel department. So it's good for everyone that likes football. I think the more football, the merrier. And I'm pretty excited to check out what the product looks like this weekend. And maybe we'll find some guys that the Bills can, kick around and bring into the roster. So that's another reason to keep an eye on it. There might be the next Duke Williams, and the wide receiver one.
obviously. No, I think it's exciting and a positive thing, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. So speaking of players, Bills things here, we got a little bit of time here to wrap it up. Guys have been getting released. We were talking about before we went on air. Guys are also getting picked up quicker than I can keep up with this time of year. It's an interesting time of year as some of these veteran guys get released. Teams are dealing with their scouting and stuff. They got to kind of stop what they're doing, take a look at their needs, see if that fits a need. Anybody that we didn't talk about before the show that Bills fans should keep an eye on that got released, or anybody maybe on the bubble pre-free agency that would get released at this point now?
Yeah, I'll talk about the one that we touched on pre-show. I know a lot of fans were interested when the Falcons released Robert Alford, the cornerback. Young guy, had a lot of potential. Well, he already got scooped up by the Cardinals, so was released, and within a matter of days, the Cardinals signed him to a 3-year, $22 million deal. So I'll say, we both are advocates of needing competition at cornerback too, and not simply relying on Levi Wallace. I think we're both fans of Levi Wallace, but I don't know that I see a 3-year, $22 million deal being the level of competition that I'm expecting. I'm expecting a 1 year, $5 million, 2 year, $10 million area. So I'd be shocked if we went that far. 3 years, $22 million. That's a starter. That's a guy that you're bringing in to replace that guy. I'm thinking more competition that could also be a good quality backup, and probably somebody who has nickel experience in case Taron Johnson's shoulder can't stay attached. So, we'll go that route. But some other guys that we've heard about, you heard Gerald McCoy, his name come out there, that it was actually reported that he's going to be released. I think he directly refuted that on Twitter from what I saw, but obviously I don't know that he's going to know that news directly. So I think we're going to see some bigger names that are out there. There's some impressive names on the potential cap casualty list, but there's also more cap space around the NFL this year than ever before. So there's not going to be as many painful decisions as what we've seen in the past. So I don't know that we're going to see a ton that way. I do think we're going to see a fair amount of competition for the guys that are out there. And again, you and I have kind of warned our fans every show that, you need to brace yourself. This is not going to be some amazing spending spree. This is not going to be some unbelievable, hey, we got the top 5 guys at every single position group, and we got the top left tackle, center, right tackle, 2 wide receivers, tight end, corner. It's just not going to be like that. There's also going to be some guys, just remember, how excited were you, Aaron, when we signed Jordan Poyer, that free agency? Just because we aren't ecstatic and doing cartwheels about the name and the 5-year, $50 million contract that somebody might get, it may be the best pickup we make is a 3-year, $12 million deal for somebody that we didn't even realize was going to be an impact player. So I think we're going to see more quantity than quality this free agency period. I think we're going to bring in a fair amount of names and a fair amount of guys, but I only expect 1 or 2 splash signings, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more in line with what you discussed when we were talking about the Super Bowl and the Patriots, and finding the Raphael Bushes and finding the guys that are going to just fit what you need at a value that, Bean talks about value and not coming off that value. So it's a mixture of fitting the need and the guys that you can fit in your scheme, and also hitting that value where you can just build up a plethora of depth guys that can come in, and the drop off between your starters and those guys is super significant, because attrition is a battle that every team faces, and there's no way to prepare for it other than having really solid depth. So that's where I think that they attack with the amount of money and draft picks that they have. And I'm excited for that. I think that is instantly going to make this team a team that can win 3 to 4 games more in a season, just having better depth. I think if you go back and look at this last year, better depth wins 2, maybe 3 games that they lost because of the lack of it.
And I know we've talked about it almost every show. Better depth directly correlates to better special teams, and that whole cyclical world is a big piece of that. So I think it's something we can definitely see.
Yeah, no, definitely. So if people like you, if they like what they heard tonight, where can they find you, and what else we got going on?
Come and find me on the Twitter machine at Greg Tomsett, GregTompsett, and every single day in the Slack channel. It's the last thing I look at before I go to bed. It's the first thing I look at when I wake up. It's maybe a little bit sad, but no, it's fantastic. It's a great group of people that I think you guys would really enjoy. Again, $25. I've wasted $25 on so many things. Come and take a look. It's totally worth it. It's an awesome group of people. You'll really enjoy it, especially coming into draft time. There's so many really good video breakdowns and scouting breakdowns of the guys that might come in there. If you want to be informed and feel good about what's going on with the Buffalo Bills, you need to be a premium channel member. Channel Cover One is totally worth it.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And also, if you just like the content that you're hearing here, just wait till you get a load of the guys that actually know what they're talking about over at cover1.net, because their content's fantastic, and they do know a lot more, at least than me. And so if you like this type of content, in-depth approach to the game, go check out cover1.net. You can download the app. We have an app on iOS or Android. Download it to your phone, and you can get all the articles. It'll notify you when new content comes up, when the new podcast gets loaded, whatever it is. Speaking of podcasts, if you're here on YouTube, we appreciate that. It's a fun thing, I think, that separates us from a lot of podcasts, that you can join live and get in the chat with us. So go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that little bell that notifies you when we go live, because sometimes we just go live without really a lot of notice. So it'll give you a notification. You can watch from anywhere. And if you do get the podcast version, wherever you get your podcast, if you could leave us a review, that helps us a ton.
Pretty please.
It really helps us. Even if you just want to talk about how nice Greg's sweaters are normally, do that. But no, honestly, the good reviews help. We do this as a hobby for fun, but it's something we enjoy, and those types of things and the viewer support and listener support really helps us out. We're super appreciative of everybody that listens to us, keeps us going in these rough times to talk about football, because there's nothing to talk about. It's you guys that keep us going. So you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716 on the Twitter, getting involved as much as I can in any type of debate. I'm willing to debate anything football related. So let's hear it from you. And obviously for Cover One, you can find us. Just search Cover One in all of your social medias, and you will find Cover One, and you will not be disappointed by the content that you receive by doing that. So thank you everybody for coming out. And Greg's got John Warrow of the AP coming on next week, and he's going to do an interview with him. So look forward to that coming out next week. And then we're going to get into deep dives into the roster. It's going to be fun stuff. We're going to really get into the meat and potatoes of this roster and prep you for the draft and free agency that way. So thanks for coming out, guys. We really appreciate it. And we'll catch you on the next one.